Oh,
Hey,
I think somebody logged in by me, so it's showing up as me. That's all.
y'all hearing
Oh,
me? Scott's here.
yes, sir.
I can, and actually, it's funny because you use my link, it shows up as me.
Oh, okay, let me get out because I used my original link. Let me
Yeah.
get out of this.
All right. Well, I know we still have some folks coming in, so thank you very much for getting on today. My clock is showing 1300 hours on the East Coast, so we will go ahead and get started. Um, Well, good afternoon, everybody. I appreciate everybody coming on today for joining today's webinar on the Staffing for Adequate Fire and Emergency Response SAFER Grant Program. My name is Jamie Burgess, and I serve as the Director of Training and Grants here at the IAFF, and I'll be facilitating today's discussion. For those of you who may be new to this program, the SAFER Grant Program is a initiative administered by FEMA that helps fire departments ensure that they have proper staffing needed to keep their community safe. The grant is designed to not only hire new firefighters, but can also be used to retain current personnel and even rehire those who may have been laid off due to budget constraints. For many, many years, the IAFF has committed to helping our affiliates secure these resources. And this is where our Grants Administration Department comes in, and I'll introduce our panelist here in just a second. But our Grants Administration Department offers guidance and support throughout the application process. They can help you navigate eligibility requirements, as well as give you strategies to help maximize your chances of success. Because ultimately, our goal is to ensure that not only that you apply, but that we do everything that we can for you to set you up for success and give you the best possible chance of your proposal being funded. So today's webinar is going to cover key aspects of the SAFER Grant Program. We'll talk about some common pitfalls to avoid, as well as best practices to strengthen your application. You'll also have the opportunity to ask questions and clarify any concerns that you may have. So we know how important staffing is to your fire department's operations, and the IAFF is here to support you in any way that we possibly can. So with me today, I have representatives from our Grants Administration Department. So please join me in welcoming our IAFF grant specialist, Scott Dennis. Scott serves as our grants coordinator and has deep experience and institutional knowledge on FEMA grant programs. And we also have Mark Oshry and Dennis Yulberg, who serve as grant specialists for the IAFF. I'm sure many of you have worked with them over the years with both SAFER and AFG grant applications. So they will be guiding us through today's webinar. And before we turn it over to Mark, Dennis, and Scott, I do want to give our assistant to the general president, Dr. Joshua Smith, an opportunity to say a few words to the group. So Dr. Smith, if you're on.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. This is our first shot at getting a webinar out to the members in relation to our various grant programs and kind of explaining how the process works. This is a practice that we hope to continue, and we want to make sure that our affiliates have the information they need. And there's no better group to walk everyone through how this process works than the guys on the call. So thank you very much, Jamie, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you very much, sir. So as I said, we're joined by our grants administration team, Mark Oshry, Dennis Yulberg, and Scott Dennis. So with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Mark to walk us through today's presentation. So thank you very much, sir.
Thanks, Jamie. So we have a lot of information to go through. Mostly it's going to be PowerPoint, and then we'll have a question and answer session at the end of things. You can put questions in the chat if you have anything there. This is kind of an abbreviated version of our ALTS presentation that we do. If you're going to be in New Orleans next month, come in and join us. There'll be a lot more time for that. And we'll see how this goes. So let me just share my screen. Hold on. So SAFER is obviously for staffing. That's why we're here to talk about. Let's see if this works. Hold on. Hold on. Technical difficulties. Share the screen, I just can't move the slide forward. Bear with me for 1 second. All right, let's see if that works. There we go. So the first and foremost we want to talk about is the IAFF and the grant assistance we offer. We take a look at narratives and review them before or after the grant submitted. We like to do it beforehand so that we can review, make suggestions, and comments to make a better, more competitive application. This is a very, very competitive process through the SAFER program. The affiliate to do this, all you need to do is the local president just needs to send in and say, hey, we'd like a review. You can talk to this person who's our grant person for this. We like it to be somebody within the local, but if not, we will work with the chief and the grant writer, whoever else. But the local president has to approve it before we do anything with it. The AFG offers 3 grant programs. We talk about the Assistance to Firefighters Grant Program, SAFER, which we're going to talk about today, and the Fire Prevention and Safety Grant Program. Those are the 3 programs. The Fire Prevention and Safety is a much smaller program that deals with smoke detectors and things along that line. The AFG program is your equipment, your training, your fun stuff like that. So the purpose of SAFER is to provide firefighters on the street. This is the definition that they give us, but basically it's to put full-time firefighters in the fire trucks. So for FY24, there was a 10% reduction from the previous years, last year. So for AFG, that was down to 291,600,000, which closes today at 5. So if you haven't finished your application, hurry up and get that submitted ASAP. For SAFER, it's down to 324 million. So it was down from 360 last year. It's a huge reduction. And FP&S is 32 million. So we're hoping the application period is going to open in early January, but pending what happens today with the government shutdown will really depend on when this application period opens up. That doesn't mean you can't get a lot of information started and get going with that information now. It's a lot of things you can actually look at. So SAFER, we hear a lot of times that I'm not going to apply, the volunteers get all the money or that kind of stuff. It's actually 80% of the money goes to hiring, only 20% goes to the recruitment retention category. So for FY23, there was 2,100 applications submitted with 191 awards, 90 of which were hiring. So 9% of the awards were actually 9% of the applications were actually awarded. So it's a very, very small amount, which is why we need to make sure that we have the most competitive applications going forward. So there's $3.3 billion requests for $360 million. So how do I get started? So you cannot, as an IAFF affiliate, directly apply for the grant, but you can work with your administration and make them aware of the grant process. You can lobby support at City Hall or Town Hall. You can ask to be part of the process. In many locals, somebody on the local is the one that writes the grants. Let's see. So the application kind of happens like this. There's the notice of funding opportunity that comes out. That's the Bible, that's the guidance. Once that comes out, the application opens up for about 30 days, give or take holidays and other things. After you submit your application, it goes through a pre-score process. That's all sorts of questions about how you staff and things along that line. That gives you a score, a pre-score. You score high enough in that, it'll go to the post panel or the peer review panel, which is where Dennis and myself come in. We go down to Maryland and we sit and we review these applications and we score them. After that happens, if it scores high enough, they combine your electronic pre-score and your panel score, and then give you a high score. If you score high enough, it goes to post panel. At post panel is FEMA personnel looking at it, saying, "Did you ask for enough money? Is it the right way? Too much?" All those things. If you score high enough, you get awarded. So planning and preparation, like I said, you can start early with this. You might need approval from the city council, the chief, the city manager. Make sure you talk to your leadership. You may have to, formally be voted on by the city council or financial departments before you can actually apply. But you can gather all your data, all your call information, all your NFIRS data about population, your apparatus level, staffing, training, etc. These are all points that you should be readily accessible and getting ahead of time so that when the application opens up, it makes it much easier for you. So like I said, the NOFO is the guidance. It contains all the rules, high, medium, low priorities, only focus on high priorities. The medium and low priorities would never be funded because there's just not enough money. So as you do your planning and preparation, we want you to conduct a risk assessment. Basically look and determine, why do I need these, these firefighters, and how are they going to work? How did I come up with my plan? So you need to prioritize your needs to the high priorities of the AFG safer programs. And we want a realistic project. We don't like to see you say, I want to hire 50 firefighters if you only have 20 in your job now. That's going to be really unrealistic. Something that can be done and actually funded and managed. So your risk assessment can be formal, can be informal. You discuss your observations of problems you need. A lot of times it's just, labor and management kind of sitting at the chief's table in the office saying, hey, what do we need and how are we going to do this? That's your risk assessment. But you need to make sure you do something to figure out how you come up with your plan. Like I said, the electronic pre-score, they don't look at the narratives at that point. They only look at the data points that are given, and it's 50% of your total score. Okay, so moving on, let's talk about the SAFER application itself. So SAFER is comprised of two activities: hiring of firefighters and recruitment and retention. We're only going to focus on hiring for this webinar, but you can apply if you're a combination department. You can apply for both activities as separate applications. But for this purpose, we're going to just talk about career and combination fire departments hiring firefighters. So generally, the grants are going to be to hire new firefighters, retain firefighters facing a layoff, or change the status of a part-time firefighter paid on-call firefighter to a full-time firefighter. What that means is new positions you don't actually have in the rank and file. And then if a firefighter is facing a layoff, it has to be an imminent layoff. They have to have as much of rules. They have to have pink slips in hand, like 180 days from the time of the application. So this is a hiring of firefighters activity. It's full salary and benefits of the safer funded positions for 3 years. And for the last few years, there's been no local cost share. It's only been 100% on FEMA for 3 years. You can increase salaries during this period of time if they're contractually or normal raises through your firefighters. SAFER prioritizes bringing non-compliant fire departments into 1710 or 1720 in the most cost-effective manner. The largest percentage of increase is the higher score. That's where your high, medium, and low priority comes in. So for this purpose, if you're currently never, and then you're going to go to, most of the time or all the time, it's going to be a high priority on both aspects. If you're already a 100% NFPA compliant and you're looking to add more personnel, and you're going to become, it's a high priority for the second, but not for the first. So it's a lower score based on that. So eligible expenses. Like I said, it's the salary and benefits. The actual payroll expenses are eligible. So if a firefighter normally gets it, they're eligible for it. Any kind of your normal package for that firefighter. There are pay raises, like I said, but only if it's like a standard pay raise that everybody gets, a step raise, that kind of thing. There are no limits on the salary amount as well. So ineligible, if they're already on the payroll, you can't actually make them a safer firefighter unless they're facing a layoff. Any pre-application costs, such as grant writer fees or admin, physicals, background checks, that's not eligible. Cost to train and equip the firefighters is not eligible. So you cannot apply for their turnout gear and you can't apply for the cost of a fire academy, but you can pay them while they're in the fire academy. Overtime costs are not eligible unless they're part of a normal FLSA package that everybody gets. So you have a 53-hour work week and normally everybody gets 3 hours of overtime every week, that would be allowed, but you can't just have backfill or overtime in there as well. So like I said, what type of firefighter positions will be funded? Only full-time positions. So they're not going to be part-time or cost share positions. They have to work at least a minimum 40 hours per week, so 80 hours per year. And this is the big one. A lot of people, everyone wants to put them on an ambulance, and FEMA has a very specific requirement that they have to be on suppression apparatus more than 50% of the time. Reviewers are real sticklers for this. They look at this and they can kind of tell when you're BSing somebody and you're saying, oh yeah, sure, they're going to be in the fire truck, but they're really going to be in an ambulance. So they have to be certified that they are on an ambulance, on a fire truck, suppression apparatus, more than 50% of the time. It's a fire staffing grant, not an EMS grant. So again, where you can Retained firefighter is facing a layoff. That is allowed. They have to have a pink slip. You do not have to keep the firefighters after 3 years. Reviewers want to see a plan. There's a question about a plan. Reviewers want to see that. You have a plan, but you're not required to keep them. The positions cannot be on the payroll unless they're facing layoff. And after you're awarded, you have 6 months before your application actually, your period of performance actually starts before you actually to get the people hired. So like we talked about the basics of an application, the statistical information, there's request details, and there's your narrative. So your statistical information is just all your call volume, budgets, things like that. Request details are how many firefighters for how much money, what are their benefits. And then the narratives, what we're going to talk about now, that's the scored sections that your reviewers read. So there are 4 scored narratives within the SAFER application: your financial need, your project description, your impact on operations, and your cost benefit. There's a community description, a few other small narratives that are not scored. The unscored questions: community description, do you protect critical infrastructure, staffing model, your hiring process, all those kind of things, as seen here. Those are all important questions, but they're not scored. So we like to see as reviewers that your narratives are written so they're clear. We understand your needs. They're fellow fire service professionals. Talk to them like you would talk to a member of your crew. If I showed up at your firehouse and you're going to tell me why you need the staffing, that's the story we want to hear. We only want to hear about local information. We don't want to hear about national statistics. Nobody cares that in the giant city down the road, they're doing something else. We want to hear about your place. Any information that's unique to your community. Do you have a river running through it? Do you have bridges? Do you have a certain population? Anything like that that's unique to your community? That's what we want to hear about. As you write your narratives, use your friends and family to look at them. They don't have to be fire service professionals. They just need to, read English and understand the sentences. Does it make sense? Does it flow well? Having an IAFF review, that's really important. That's going to make everyone's lives better later as we make suggestions and comments of how to make the application better. And then focus on the high priorities. Like I said, if your application is not a high priority, it's not going to be funded. Mention in your narrative that it's combined labor management effort. We like to see, IAFF local in the city or town. It shows that there's support on both sides of the aisle, that the management isn't just jamming this down the throats and it's going to be a problem. Something along the line of like IAF, XYZ Fire Department and labor representatives of IAFF local determine the request, positions be used to do this. That really helps to make it better. As you write, anytime you find yourself using more than, less than, increasing, all those things, you need to back it up with concrete data and statistics. We don't like to say just, we're responding to more calls than ever. What does that mean? Nobody knows. Say, over the last 5 years, our call volume has increased from this to that. Everybody's doing more with less. You talk about the last 1 to 5 years in actual data, relevant data. Remember, your peers read this. You don't need to give all crazy aspects of NFPA standard, 1710, subsection 4.79325, whatever. Nobody wants to read that 1,000 times as reading applications. Just tell us exactly what will change to bring you in compliance with the grant. Maintain a smooth flow of information. Avoid jumping back and forth. Don't use, confusing phrasing or terms. If you have a weird local thing you call something different, spell it out that somebody not from your area will understand. The easier it is for the peer reviewer to read it, the higher you're going to score as it flows, and they can just go, oh, I understand what you're talking about. The more you confuse us, the more I have to read a certain sentence over and over again, the harder it's going to be for me to score you well, or a reviewer to score you well. So things like simply state, 4 or 5 minutes rather than 4 minutes will bring us into compliance with 1710. You don't need to say all that other wordage. It's just way too much and way too long. Your reviewers are going to get really, really annoyed if they have to read that 10 times in one application. So moving on to the actual narrative questions themselves. We don't know what they're actually going to be for this year since they haven't released the guidance. We're assuming they're going to be very, very similar to what we're going to show you now. So your financial need narrative, it's one narrative. This is 30% of your total score. You have 4,000 characters. We don't advocate using every single one of those characters, but sometimes you need to explain your situation in those. So they want to see those is right from the last year's question. Income versus expense breakdown, budget shortfalls, and the ability to address your financial need, actions taken, and how the critical functions are affected without this funding. So we want you to describe why you can't complete this project without federal assistance. Excuse me, compare your income to expenses, show where the money goes. Have you asked for funding from town hall or city hall? Excuse me, to increase the staffing? Have they said no? We want to know where your money comes from. Is it all taxes? Is it all EMS revenue? Do you do bake sales and fundraisers? Where does it come from? And then where does it go? We need to see a budget breakdown somewhere. Describe your financial stressors. Do you have other capital projects? Have you just spent, $30 million on fire apparatus or a new station, or maybe City Hall decided they want to build a new sewer plant, or something else going on? The different things in your city, your unemployment rate, your financial unemployment, anything along that line. Have you lost a big mill in town that just closed? Do you have a large amount of non-paying entities like churches or federal facilities? Up in my community, we deficit spend snow and ice removal up in Massachusetts. So we can do that. We can talk about that. So that every year we budget $250,000. We spend, 5 million. That comes right off the top next year. COVID. Everyone likes to talk about COVID still. This really is a thorn in reviewers' side as they look at this and see this. It should be really negligible now. The only kind of COVID thing you would have at this point in most cases would be if businesses closed and you have a lot of vacant properties and then just never reopened because of COVID. If you say COVID-19 has caused, financial impact, you better back up the statement with some kind of information to tell us. And then talk about anything that puts a strain on your budget. Any kind of, you have injuries for firefighters, a lot of overtime for some unforeseen circumstance. Anything that's taking money away from anything else. Last 3 to 5 years, anything else that's gone on within your department. We've talked about any competing priorities in City Hall. Did you try to get this funded and it didn't work? Have you asked if some places that don't have ballot initiatives? Have you asked for increases they've said no to? Have you tried to do a big sale and it failed? Anything along that line, the review wants to hear about. Where does your money come from? Where does it go? If you've had to provide concessions that you take the guy to fight prevention and put him back on the street, then say that. We want to hear that. The review wants to hear that. If the IAFF local provided concessions, make sure you say that. We renegotiated the contract. We did something to bring in more staff to the street. I mentioned providing a budget breakdown. Reviewers really want to see where your money goes. We don't care if your budget is 100 million or 500,000. It's just where the money comes from and where it goes. It doesn't have to be every specific line item. You can group line items together for things, but make sure it adds up to the same. If I say my budget is $4 million, make sure if a reviewer takes a calculator at the end, that number adds up to that same amount. Any local terms, your reviews will be from your area. Up in Massachusetts, we have Proposition 2.5. If I say that to a person from California, they're going to have no idea what I'm talking about. So make sure you say it's something along the line of it's a levy limiting legislation that limits tax increases 2.5% of the previous year. Reviewers need to see that, because if you just say Prop 2.5, I'm going to gloss right over it. You can also, one thing reviewers want to see, you can have budget increases from year to year. That's okay. When you list your budget items, we just want to see where the money went. So if your budget went up by $1 million year to year, state somewhere in your narrative where that money went. Did it go some places have to put capital improvements in their budget? Other places contractual obligation for staffing that went up. Whatever it is, we don't care as long as you tell us where it went. So that was your financial need. Your project description, also 30% of your score. This is a little different. This is 4 separate narratives that you have to answer. So it's, why does the department need the positions? How will they be used within the department? What specific benefits will they provide? And how the funds will help you protect critical infrastructure within your primary area. So we want to see in your first sentence kind of what you're asking for. The XYZ Fire Department is requesting $900,000 to hire 12 new firefighters so we can reopen a brownout station. I know instantly how much you're asking for, how many people you're hiring, and what you're going to do with those people. Talk about how you got to this number. How often does whatever you're trying to do respond? You're trying to reopen a station? Okay, tell me about how often that area is busy. If you're adding a fourth to an engine or a ladder, how often does that truck go out the door? How many fires does it go to? You need to tell us what standard you're trying to reach, 1710 or 20, but don't harp on the standard. Just mention it once in there and kind of tell us, we're trying to reach 1710. What issues you're having with your current staffing. Is this based on that risk analysis? Are your response times increasing? Do you have a specific target hazard in that browned out area? Do you have an incident? Did you have a fatal fire hit somewhere of something that happened in that area that's causing a problem? Did you have forced overtime causing a budget killer? Why did you come up with this project? Everybody else is asking the same kind of thing. Everyone wants that extra firefighter. Why is your grant different than the next? Tell a story. Tell me your story. That's what we all want to hear. Get personal. Give us your specific problems. We want to know. I want to hear your story. I didn't want to hear just a bland blanket statement. We want more firefighters. We need more guys on the street. We don't want to hear that. We want to hear specifics. Your next narrative, this is your third narrative, your third scored narrative. It's also 30% of your score. This is going to be, it's two separate narratives in this case. It's what are the risks and how will the risks be reduced? So for this, we want to hear the impact in your daily operations. How will these firefighters improve your operations, reduce risk? How often does that truck respond? How it impacts public safety? Anything else daily that will happen? Will that truck go out and do school presentations? Will it respond always to the nursing home that's right around the corner from it? How is this going to help you? How is having that fourth firefighter, third firefighter, second firefighter, whatever you're asking for, what are they going to do? How does that make your life specifically better? The NIST study that's out there is great information, but relate that back to your department about how that fourth firefighter is going to do for your department, a third firefighter. Why can't you do now what you can't do? Why can't you do what you want with the requested personnel? Is lack of sufficient personnel preventing you from responding? Why is that fourth person important? Do you have a closed ladder company or engine company? That fatal fire. I worked with some departments that had a fatal fire in an area, and they make a really great story or a near miss or any kind of thing like that you can make your case with. How do you compare to similar sized jurisdictions in your area? Does the neighboring community have a lot more firefighters than you for a smaller population? Why? Tell us that. How are those firefighters at risk or the civilians at risk if you don't get those firefighters? Lastly, for your scored narratives is your cost benefit. This is 10% of your score. This is just the quantitative list of the benefits of having these firefighters to any kind of financial thing. If you're spending a lot of overtime to staff that position or staff that firehouse, that's going to reduce that overtime. Tell us, give us amounts. If you are going to, had injuries and this is going to help prevent those, tell us all about that. Reviewers want to see some kind of information on there to base financial versus the benefits of this project. Talk about decreased property loss, having that third or fourth firefighter, how much more efficient you're going to be. Do you do a lot of mutual aid? That kind of stuff. We like to see a cost benefit analysis, a cost per resident per the 3 years of the grant, per firefighter per career, anything to give us some kind of information to kind of rate it against other departments. And then I can say you did a cost benefit so that I can help give you a higher score. So if you take your total budget, so let's say it's 3.9 million, divide it by your population, it's only going to be the cost per firefighter is 27 cents a year. Wow, that's a great number. We like to see that kind of information. How does this cost compare to other options? Did you look at other options? Any savings, reduction in overtime, injuries? What are the risks and what are the consequences of not funding this? Have there been specific injuries? Did you delay a fire attack from the closed company? Were there huge losses in a fire that may have been prevented? Mutual aid, how often do they respond? One thing that's kind of got me in the last few years, everyone talks about ISO ratings, and they'll say, oh, we're going to increase or increase our ISO rating. You say, I'm going to increase my ISO rating to a class whatever, and it's going to save all this money. Prove it. Call your insurance company and say, hey, we're going to go from a class 5 to a class 2. What is the average homeowner going to save in my community? Prove that reduction. Don't just say it because it doesn't really mean anything without the numbers. So you've researched it. The average homeowner is going to save X number of dollars. That's super important to hear. So that was all your narrative points. FEMA produces, once you write your narratives, there's self-evaluation sheets you can go through. These are what the actual peer review panelists will use to score your narratives. They're found on the FEMA website, the AFG website or SAFER website. They look a little like this. It's just a screenshot of it. These ask the points that you're supposed to answer. And then they give you the scores. These are top two, strongly agree, and agree. And it goes through and basically gives the guidance to the reviewer of how to score that. So you can give these score sheets to a non-partial person within a friend, a family, department member, have them read your narratives with these score sheets, and then say, hey, I think you nailed it, or you didn't really explain in good detail one section or another section. So we talk about peer review. What is peer review? How does it work? So there are 9 major fire service organizations that work with FEMA that send representatives to peer review. We all volunteer our time to be there. There's about 100, 200 people, depending on the year. They're typically broken out into career firefighters read career, combo read combo, volleys read volleys applications. It doesn't always work that way. We try to do it that way. One thing to remember is that reviewer may be from a much bigger or smaller jurisdiction than you. So you make your project clear, explain it in clear detail, exactly what you need to do or what you want to do. Each application is read by 3 people and scored independently across these scoring metrics. If they're too far apart, if I score one way and somebody else scores another way, we have to have a conversation about why we scored that way. Typically, anything under strongly agree is not going to be funded. They're just that tight. Every time I make a score or a reviewer makes a score, they have to put comments of why we chose that score. If you're unsuccessful in your narrative, you can call on your application, you can reach out to FEMA and actually have them give you the reviewer comments, a paraphrase, or reviewer comments of why you did not score that well. You do great, everything goes through. What's next is it goes to the technical evaluation process or post panel. This is where the Safer Office program people, the FEMA people, read this and look at your application to make sure that you didn't ask for too much money, you didn't ask for benefits that aren't allowed, all those kind of things. And once that happens, if you score high enough, you actually get awarded. Like I said, if you get a turn down letter, you can ask FEMA for help. But there are always good projects left on the table. Even excellent applications just aren't funded. There's not enough money. Fractions of points change score, change where you're going to be funded. So best practices. So we're going to kind of wrap this up a little bit. Start your research as soon as possible. Use those FEMA self-evaluation sheets. As you write your narratives, it's very, very common for people to put placeholders because I don't know the amount of money. I don't need to know whatever. Make sure you go back in and fill those all in. Every year we're sitting at the table and you see one with a bunch of X's, or you see a comment from, have Sheila in accounting fill this in. And we always get a good chuckle at that and we laugh at that and we feel bad because that's somebody's application that's not going to get funded. So make sure you fill in everything, all those X's, make sure you fill those out. Write clearly. It's about quantity, not quality, not quantity. Make sure you don't have to fill every letter, every character in that space, unless you need to. Just make sure it flows and is a clear picture of what you're presenting to us. Explain your financial need. Like I said, you're in conversation with somebody. I walked in your station and you're saying, hey, why can't you afford this project? Tell war stories. Give me real, true examples to prove your points. We want that clear picture. Tie request to public safety and firefighter safety. One observation that we've had in the last few years is as costs of everything increase and the funding's been stagnant, there's fewer awards every year. So your attention to detail is very, very important. I'll put my political hat on for a second and just say the importance of lobbying. This program needs more money. The only way it gets more money is if we're a thorn in their sides in Congress and make sure they know how important this is to the firefighters on the streets. It was $3.3 billion in requests last year for $360 million. So we need to get out there. We need to lobby. We need to get more money. So FEMA provides these grant resources. The help desk is huge. The email for them or the FEMA Fire Grants website has a ton of information on it. The IAFF, like I said, we're here to help. We're here to do review for you, answer your questions, provide as much information as help to you as we can. The sooner you get to us, the better it is. We need to make sure we have time to answer your questions, get the answers for you, and review your narratives and applications. And with that, that's my spiel. So we'll open this up for questions. I'm not sure if we've had any questions come in to us through the chat, or if anyone has any questions, please feel free to send them to us. I kind of zipped through that pretty fast. I'm sorry, I talked kind of fast.
No, all is well, Mark. We did have a couple of questions that came in through the chat. If you do have a question, you can either drop it in the chat box or you can raise your hand and we'll tap you to ask your question out loud. But just in case you weren't viewing the chat box, we had a couple that came in. Does the local president need to make the request through their DVP, or can they contact the grants division directly? We would ask that you loop your district vice president in just to give them visibility on the request, and they may be able to provide some local assistance. So please send your request for grant application reviews to your district vice president. We had another question that came in about the recruitment and retention program. It was somebody with a combination department, and they're looking to apply for that category. We do not currently have a webinar scheduled specifically for recruitment and retention. However, we'll be more than happy to help. Please direct your request to firegrants@iaff.org. And I will say there's been a couple that have came in that are going to require us to do a little bit more research on. If we tell you to send it in to firegrants@iaff.org, please do so, and we will make sure to research that and get back to you as quickly as possible.
So I have a couple of questions in the Q&A section that I can kind of look at. I'm not sure if we've answered them or not. I'm not sure. So when the SAFER grant is nearing the end of time, is there an extension that can be filed? The answer is maybe, probably not. If you have successfully completed your project, you hired the firefighters, and you've gone through, you just had extra funds at the end of the 3-year period of performance because you put a higher rate in than you actually thought, then no. If there was a delay in hiring for some reason, you may be able to get an extension. You'd have to work with your SAFER grants person at FEMA. And then there's a question about companies that can provide administrative support. We don't want to result in additional burden on our admin staff. So unfortunately, we don't have any recommendations for that. There is a lot of paperwork with SAFER, but it is pretty manageable. There's more for SAFER than there is for AFG, but it is pretty manageable. There are companies out there that will write these for you and do things for you. You can put in a very small amount for management fee for things. To $1,500, I believe now, is what FEMA will do total for the 3 years to help offset that burden. But I wouldn't let not applying be the problem. I would hope that if you get an award for several $1 million, that they could find money to pay for some admin costs. But unfortunately, we couldn't help you with that. Let's see. If you've gotten a previous award, what's the likelihood a grant to continue funding for the previous award? So you can't actually continue funding year to year like that. They'd have to be getting layoffs for that. So they'd have to be pending a layoff. You can get grant year after year, but that has to be new personnel. So to continue funding, it would only be if there was an imminent layoff. Can this be used to promote firefighters to investigators? No. What you can do with SAFER would be to promote the firefighters into investigators, and then write the SAFER to backfill those positions and say, because we had to promote firefighters to investigators, now we have vacant positions we need to fill. You could do that. Let's see. The next question was about we, the county, currently staff medic units only. Crossed up a couple of stations, fire engines when needed. Will they worry about getting into the weeds on who owns the building or apparatus, or they let us handle that? Mostly they let you handle who owns what. It's all about staffing. The question would be if they're on the fire apparatus more than 50% of the time, will be the only way you can actually get funding for that. If they're on the medic unit all the time and then jump to the fire engine, they're probably not going to be an eligible application. Let's see. People asking about recording and watching later. I'm not sure. Let's see. How would a high-risk, low-frequency firefighter assignment be judged, i.e. hazmat or tech rescue? So again, this is firefighters in the street, so it would be more of the putting the second, third, fourth on the fire engine, or even staffing a new engine. So if you're going to do that, it's not really staffing a low frequency apparatus is not really going to be a good project. But what you could do is, again, backfill those positions that you've staffed. And backfill those positions you staffed onto the hazmat or tech rescue. All right. if there's agreements pertaining to contractual staffing levels not being followed, that has been filed, I don't say, could that be used as a need? You could mention any kind of contractual staffing levels not being followed, but you'd have to provide a lot more information about why they're not being followed. And I'd more make it about the financial need about not being followed than an admin problem, if you're having one with that. Can SAFER be used to add staffing in preparation of retirements? Yes and no. So you could add the staffing, but for the 3-year life of the grant, you need to maintain the level of firefighters you had at the beginning of the grant, plus the SAFER. So if you had 100 firefighters and you added 5 SAFER positions, for the entire life of this 3 years, you'd have to have 105 firefighters. At the end of this 3 years, you can do whatever you want. SAFER's hiring. I understand SAFER's for hiring firefighters. Our department jumps rigs from ambulance to engine. Does this affect our application? Yes, it would, as long the firefighters have to be on the apparatus more than 50% of the time, the fire apparatus. So you'd have to mention that more than that. So if they're jumping back and forth, you need to make sure you reiterate how much time they're on the fire apparatus. And the reviewer is going to kind of look and see your call volume and kind of figure out what the deal is. See, when the 3-year period is over, does the department have to absorb the cost? We like to see the cost be absorbed, but you don't have to. At the end of the 3 years, there's no requirement to keep the positions. We just like to see them filled or see a plan. So, all right, we're looking for an adding another shift, going from a 2448 to a 2472. Absolutely, you could look at doing this that way. That'll be a great project. You just have to explain why you need to do that, how that's going to work, how what the shift is going to be, that kind of stuff. And lastly, in my queue here, how do departments retain SAFER grant hires so a city cannot just lay them off at the end of the grant? It's just a risk you have to accept. There's no requirement. FEMA's going to want to see a plan, or the reviewers want to see a plan, but you're not required to keep those firefighters at the end of the 3 years. And there's nothing, unfortunately, you can do with that unless you get some kind of agreement with your department. But FEMA's not going to look at it after that. That was the questions in the list. I don't know if there are other questions out there.
We did have several folks reach out about recording of today's webinar. Please contact communications@iaff.org. I dropped it in the chat box for those of you who would like to come back and view this. If you would like a copy of the presentation, please reach out to firegrants@iaff.org, and we would be happy to get that information over to you. We had a couple of folks who had raised their hands. If you do have a question that has not been answered yet, if you want to raise your hand, we can call on you to answer your question. Somebody just asked if we're available for follow-up questions. Of course, please reach out to us at firegrants@iaff.org, and we would be happy to answer any follow-up questions that you may have. We had one come in. Our city was able to pass an emergency responder levy with police and fire. The funding provides for increased staffing, but also capital equipment. The SAFER grant would allow us to spend more of the levy money to purchase needed apparatus. Question is, would having the levy cause us to be ineligible for a SAFER grant?
So to answer that, it's kind of a multi-fold thing. No, having a levy doesn't affect you as long as the levy is not for staffing. If the levy is for staffing, then that's kind of like you can't have your department, you can't offset your department that way. But it's all in how you tell the story for that. Provides increased staffing, but also get them. So if you earmark that levy money to pay for apparatus and station, then that's fine. You're just going to tell that you have this levy, and that's what you're going to use in 3 years to pay for the staffing. But right now, you don't have that money available because it's being earmarked for other projects. That's okay.
All right. Any more questions? Not seeing any. So as I said, if you would like a copy of today's webinar, please reach out to communications@IAFF.org. If you just want the presentation slide deck, please reach out to firegrants@IAFF.org. And as well as if you have any follow-up questions. And of course, once the notification of funding opportunity drops, please reach out to us if we can help you in any way with your application review. For those of you who will be at ALTS, I would highly encourage you to check out our class on, I believe it's on Wednesday, January 8th. Please drop in and we'll have more time to discuss any particulars that you may have with your department or within your local. It's always a very informative session. So if you will be in New Orleans for ALTS, we would highly encourage you to come to the class, but not seeing any other questions. So I want to thank everybody.
I do see one that was asked and maybe even answered, but how long after a successful SAFER application do you have to wait to apply again? You don't have to wait at all. You can apply immediately the following year, as long as there are additional firefighters over your previous award. So you hired a fourth firefighter for each engine. Now you want to hire a fourth firefighter for each ladder. That's an okay project to do the next year. You could do that without any waiting. You just can't use that money to do what you already done.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody. I hope all of you have a very Merry Christmas and a happy holidays. Please stay safe, and we're here to help. However we can be of assistance, please let us know. But we will go ahead and end today's webinar. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you all for joining.
Thank you.